We are back with breaking news. You cannot make it up. I was handed news on the Mulvaney suit as I was doing this breakdown. Remember all the pressure I just walked through? How it was odd that Mick Mulvaney is making common cause with these critics of Trump, which is what they were attempting to do in court today. Well, I'm holding here the news. Lawyers for Mick Mulvaney saying they are now withdrawing formally the motion to intervene in this very case, but instead will, quote, file their own lawsuit as a separate case, meaning this entire controversy is still very much alive, but Mulvaney perhaps buckling to some of this late-breaking pressure about who he was working with. As promised, we bring in Mother Jones Washington Bureau Chief David Corn and former federal prosecutor Paul Butler. Good evening, gentlemen.
Good evening.
David, this is one of those nights. I got handed this as we were doing the breakdown. Your view of both the larger arc, which is Mulvaney still not taking Donald Trump at his word in requesting he clam up, and also what it means with the late-breaking news that he is not going to do it through the vehicle of the guy who accused him of cooking up a drug deal.
Well, my head is still spinning from your crystal clear explanation of this issue, because it is rather complicated and does seem to cut against some instinctual positions. I mean, the key thing to keep in mind here is that Mulvaney, in testimony that's come out recently, gets more of a central role in the extortion, bribery scheme, whatever you want to call it. You know, when Fiona Hill, the top Russian advisor in the White House, when her testimony was released the other day, I thought one of the key points was it wasn't just Giuliani who was cooking up this pressure scheme against the Ukrainians. It was Giuliani and Mulvaney. And as you noted in your wonderful setup, when John Bolton referred to the fact that I don't want to be part of any drug deal, meaning any illegal improper arrangement, he called it Sondland's and Mulvaney's drug deal.
Well, he said cooking up. You're making an inference. He could have meant that he was worried about them using heat or fire to create drugs in the White House.
Yeah, exactly.
You're
they're
not
doing
ruling that out.
crystal meth there. They're watching Breaking Bad, and that's what they're doing, which might be an easier out for them than what they're actually involved in.
I mean, actually, one could argue that some of the penalties for certain low-level drug offenses are lower than the kind of federal corruption cases Paul used to prosecute.
And that's how they want criminal justice reform. But Mulvaney has gotten to be a more critical player. Plus, as you note, there was his confession in front of national TV. And so the fact that he's talked about this openly and publicly certainly would undermine any claim he has to absolute immunity, which is what they're saying. Not just executive privilege, but absolute immunity.
Before I go to Paul,
I don't even know what it is.
Yeah, David, before I go to Paul on the law, on the Washington of this, it's a very Washington story. There was pushback, there was scrutiny, obviously. It seems, the breaking news, but my read on it would be Mulvaney has buckled to some of that pressure. Do you view that as a thing where Trump and the pressure that Mulvaney's under, they care more about how it looks than the underlying litigation?
I think, well, you had Kupperman and John Bolton, who's party to the suit, saying, get out of here. We don't want you. Our reasons for bringing the suit are different than yours. We're talking about national security matters. You've already confessed. And I think they saw his involvement as maybe polluting the case. And so I don't know, to what degree Trump came in and said, do or don't, proceed with this. But it really raised so many eyebrows that it seemed that he was basically trying to join a party that didn't want him anywhere near the punch bowl. So that might have been the bottom of it. But as, the main issue of to testify or not to testify still remains front and center for all of them.
Paul, you've been sitting here with me thinking this all through. What is the significance that, again, reading from the breaking news, it says Mulvaney will still file his own lawsuit as a separate case, which means the core of what we were just reporting on, that rather than saying, yes, Mr. President, obviously there's a good reason not to testify, instead he's saying, no, Mr. President, I kind of got to get some outside ruling here.
Yes. So, Ari, if your boss, the president, tells you not to testify, but the Congress orders you to testify, what do? That's the issue before the courts. And both Kupperman and Mulvaney were in a similar situation, but there are crucial differences. First, Kupperman is suing both Congress and the president. Mulvaney only wants to sue Congress. Again, he's going along with what Trump wants him to do. Kupperman is a former employee. Mulvaney still is the acting chief of staff and the head of the office of OMB. And the biggest difference, though, is that Kupperman is neutral. He really wants to know the answer. He's between a rock and a hard place, between the Congress and the president. Mulvaney is all Team Trump. And so we can assume that whatever he's doing, including this bizarre move of joining this lawsuit, is in the interest of Donald Trump.
So what is the interest? I mean, that's a little bit of a different theory than David. Why go into court at all?
Again, it could be some stalling tactic. There's no case or controversy with Kupperman now. So it sounds like what happens is the judge said, look, Kupperman came in to see if he has to obey the subpoena. Congress withdrew the subpoena. Congress says,
in that particular instance,
in that case, Congress says, whenever people who are part of the administration say that they're not going to testify, we're just going to chalk that up.
We're going to roll right by it.
Yeah,
but Bolton is still seeking this.
Yeah, and so there are other court cases in which a judge will decide the same issue. Don McGahn, way back to the Russian investigation, he's in the same position. He's a former employee. Again, he's been subpoenaed. He asked the court to tell him what to do. Should he obey the president or Congress? Right. That case is the furthest along. So that will.
And that's different, although Bolton's lawyers have argued that the McGahn case is potentially weaker for Pelosi and the Democrats than this one, because here the full force of impeachment powers are without a doubt in play.
That's exactly right. So one of the benefits of this being an official impeachment inquiry is that Congress has the right to a lot more evidence, and the president's claims of absolute immunity or executive privilege don't have the same force as if there's not an impeachment inquiry.
So, David, you feel like this is MSNBC or Court TV tonight? I mean, we're right in it. I want to broaden back out. If everyone's saying, oh, all these names and all these suits flying by, we're still talking about the #1 Trump aide who handled the money, who was credibly accused by other people of being the instrument in-house, Giuliani out-house, but he in-house, of the bribery plot, and then went out on TV, as you emphasize, and you can't emphasize this enough when you have something like this happen, and said, yeah, quid pro quo bribery, we do it all the time, get over it, then tried to retract that. And so that's where, if he does testify in public, we're going to see some version, the most recent Mulvaney 3.0, which is, we call that around here, post-full Mulvaney, is what we saw on Fox. Take a look, David.
You were asked specifically by Jonathan Karl, was investigating Democrats one of the conditions for holding up the aid? Was that part of the quid pro quo? And you said it happens all the time.
Yeah, but go back and watch what I said before, that there is not a quid pro quo.
You were asked by Jonathan Karl, you described a quid pro quo, and you said that happens all the time.
And reporters will use their language all the time. So if my language never said quid pro quo.
Well, he's doing what his boss does, right? Just denying reality and trying to gaslight people who saw very clearly what he said. Earlier today, we had Donald Trump say that the Democrats are doctoring the transcripts coming out of the investigation when there's absolutely no evidence of that. And, you know, one big question from Mulvaney is he's, you know, the acting chief staff, the acting head of OMB. He's acting everywhere. But the people who participated in the Ukraine foreign policy decision-making still don't understand and then never got a clear explanation. We see this in a transcript that came out tonight of why the aid was being withheld.
Right.
They never, you know, it was coming from the OMB, and it was always kind of like suspicious.
If there's no bad reason, what was the legitimate reason?
Yeah, I mean, they never were given a clear understanding. And so they were all very suspicious. Mulvaney is in the middle of that. He's in the middle of what John Bolton called the drug deal to put pressure on the Ukrainians. I mean, he's a key witness. And if you go back to Nixon and Watergate,
key witness, he might be an alleged co-conspirator.
Which is why.
He might be that. And, you know, in the Watergate tape case, the Supreme Court said you can't hide wrongdoing under the cloak of executive privilege.
So, David, you said gaslight?
I said gaslight.
You're raising the question of whether the alleged drug deal was cooking up crack with a gaslight.
A Bunsen burner? I think that's how they did it in Breaking Bad.
Well, because the gaslight, I think, is from it's black and white film where it's the light in the stove.
Actually the lamp
in the stove. Yeah.
You know, just really quickly to the point about Mulvaney, he's got to be worried about or whether Donald Trump is going to protect him. So, you know, there started out with this defense that there was no quid pro quo. That's not going to work. A whole parade of witnesses to Congress has rebutted and established that there wasn't, and established conclusively that there was. Now it looks like Team Trump is going to the "it wasn't me" defense, the Shaggy defense. It wasn't me, and they're going to blame people like Giuliani and Mulvaney. And so, if I were Mulvaney, or if I were Mulvaney's lawyer, I tell them to proceed with caution. Don't assume that Trump is going to protect you.
We're over time, but briefly, David, final word on that. I mean, that's what happened to John Dean. He saw it coming at him, and that's part of what changed his mind.
But we have now testimony already saying, talk to Rudy, coming from Trump. So Trump acts like the mafioso Don who says, you know what? I want to fix this thing. You talk to Rudy. He knows what to do. Rudy knows what to do. So it's going to be very hard for these guys, for the White House, to pin it on Rudy or Mulvaney when we have testimony that Trump directed people in those directions.
David Corn, Paul Butler on a night of breaking news handed to us while we were doing this very story. Thanks to both of you. Hey, I'm Ari Melber from MSNBC. You can see more of our videos right here, or better yet, subscribe to our YouTube channel below. You could have been anywhere in the world, but you're here with us, and we appreciate that.